Oh, wow.
We are recording. I found the host.
Great.
And thank you, Jim. Let's get started. This is Joachim Stroh from Brooklyn, New York, in our Monday session. Lots of the agenda today. So let's quick check-in, quick round. What's going on? What's on your minds? Let me start. I'm very much looking forward to two conferences this week. There's KM World, started today, I think, but I'll join them on Wednesday, Thursday. And that's in Washington, D.C. And then there is the Platform Cooperativism Conference here at the New School in New York City. So very much looking forward to that. That starts on Friday, Saturday, and I think there's some events also on Sunday. And I'm going to see Laura there plays too, right?
Yep.
Talking about Laura, so do you want to share something?
Yeah. So I'm flying out to New York tomorrow. Going to be doing some stuff on responsible tech development, Platform Co-ops conference, and helping facilitate the technology fringe event of Platform Co-ops on Sunday as well. And earlier today, I had my interview for a Shuttleworth Fellowship to develop stuff for the collective and other things. So fingers crossed. I never got through the interview before, so that's very exciting. No idea what the odds are there, but that would give me a bit more bandwidth, which is good. Yeah, so just packing for New York. That's my life today.
I was really hoping to be packing for New York. I tried to come, and instead I'll be packing to go down to the Bay Area because my dad has gotten a lot worse.
Sorry to hear that.
But we woke up to snow this morning, which was totally unexpected. Usually you have some hard freezes and stuff before it snows in the gorge, and it's already melted and raining, but there was snow on the deck, actually sticking.
Wow.
Yep. And we've got 2 inches in Western Canada, which is about a month earlier than usual.
Yeah.
It's a little Arctic airflow. Don't worry about it. Which makes me wish I was in New York this weekend. I hope you guys are going to carry constant webcams on your headsets,
GoPro.
We need it all. Wish I was there.
Thanks, Michael. Jim?
Well, it's another beautiful day here in the dry season in Brooksville, Florida. I went down to the beach for a swim with family on over the weekend, and been focusing on the how to get leadership to emerge above or below the flow in the social ledger trial and the Casper consensus protocol, which our chain will be presenting at the conference as well. And they're sponsoring a lot of the work we're doing on the social ledger. So we should be extra nice to them when you're out there.
We'll do so. Thanks, Jim. Wish I could take a swim this morning in the ocean. John, anything that's on your mind? Do you want to share anything here?
No, I've got lots to learn. I will say something that will probably upset people, but it's not meant to be like that. But I'm trying to understand the value that a member will get. Now that might sound strange, I hope it doesn't, but that's I need to understand that fully before I can make a value contribution. So bear with me, there's a lot to learn, and that's it really. I'm looking forward to it, by the way.
That's great, thanks for bringing that up, John. And there's going to be a separate session. I don't know, Laura, this is now part of the interim management committee, right? The value proposition discussion. Maybe we pull it into a Zoom session too,
Yeah, it's going to be taking over one of the Zoom sessions. I need to check the scheduling. We'll announce a specific date tomorrow, but it's open to anybody, but we've wanted to schedule it to make sure we had a good number of the interim management committee present. Because I think our regular Zooms, it's obviously, as you can see here, quite erratic attendance. So doing a proper piece of scheduling so we can get a good number of folks around. But yeah, you're welcome to join in, and that will be focusing on clarifying that value proposition and how we can actually clarify it as well, because it's not clear to all of us. So you're not alone, John.
And that's with the realization that we're both a worker and consumer cooperative with each having their own value proposition.
And some of us are erratic consistently.
I don't want you to take this as a criticism. It's not. It's my fault. So bear with me. What I should have done from day one is kept a diary. I think that would have been useful, but I haven't. But anything that sticks in my mind, I will bring it up much later. So
Sure, we love
I was
to
actually,
hear that.
I was wondering if we should add a member feedback channel that just in the main collective, just so we can really clearly say, oh, this is a way to give feedback. And then people who wanted to keep a diary or something like that, you could just at the end of the day say, this is what I felt. This is, one thing that went well, one thing that confused me.
Maybe we can use the welcome channel for that, because it's a little bit sparse. People jump in, they see that the first time, and then they immediately jump out of this into other channels. Maybe we can expand that a little bit and
Just say
include
welcome
and something like that, right?
But the point is the personal record. The primary experience is what I experienced when I joined into a new thing. I don't need to share that with anybody else, primarily, selectively so, but I wish I'd kept a diary of how I come into this process too.
Well, it's never too late. Okay, let's get back. Jim, yeah?
I was just wondering if John has an idea of the kind of value he might expect out of an organization like this.
It's got more layers, and I'm getting more value from it than I ever anticipated. Now that's what I wanted to leave that until a later stage, but as an onboarding process. Now you've got to remember, I'm a northerner from England, so we have a reputation for being a bit slow. But it's probably the way I go about things that's different. But if I knew that from day one, maybe that would be different. And maybe we could come on to this when we're looking at this ad campaign offer. But I'm really excited about this. And it's not even a chore to me. What is actually happening is I'm neglecting work. I'm reading too much. And what has surfaced is this idea of the economy that's, when it will happen, I don't know. How far it is ahead, I don't know. I'm finding that quite daunting. This idea of a completely different economy, Bitcoin. So that's a long, rambling answer to your question, but I hope it's better response than you would hope for.
Love it. We
Thank
need
you.
some things like this. Yep.
Okay.
Very good. Thank you, John.
So
And that's a good.
Sounds like transforming you into the decentralized world.
The transformation process is already happening.
Yeah. On to Wardley.
Because John
yes.
brought up the other topic, we wanted to talk about that first. So I posted, let me post the link to the meeting doc for John. And actually, let me share the screen so we can all see that. So John, what we usually have is a meeting document. You can type /dig into any spot inside Mattermost, and you'll see a link to the meeting notes and agenda that we use for these Zoom sessions. /dig is a command that is helpful in that case. So as a link in the chat, and here's the meeting doc, and right up here is the discussion on the ad that you had brought up. And I want to give you the microphone, John, but just wanted to point out a few things I wanted to go over here. One is get consent on this idea of that the collective would want to put out an ad and what the implications for that are. because we haven't done this before, right? And it's here. Let me open this. We're talking about a fairly large potential audience that could see the ad, right? You're talking about impressions in the range of 250 to 300,000 people, right? And we have to, make sure we understand what is happening after we do this, and are we prepared, and will this give us, change in things we expected to change. It's the last time we talked about adding a link to your website, right, to the IT Jobs Watch site, which is a separate section, which is good for SEO. But this now here to me is a level up, right? Now we're talking about putting, well, you tell us more about it, putting a banner on some of your pages there, and what that means. So without further ado, now I can hand over the content, the mic to you. There's two subsequent things I want to talk about too. Is if we do this, if we get a large amount of visitors because of an ad like this, let's get ready with some of the content pieces. For example, the videos we recently created, I want to put those out there, and the membership listing that we have. Make sure they all have pictures and are up to date, and maybe include some more members. Okay, John. So let me stop sharing here.
I would like to get onto the maps, because that's the meat of this thing. And this is a really simple proposition. And it's it may be, I've run my own business for 15 years, and it may be my approach is slightly too eager, or what I would like to do is to be able to make a contribution up front, and I'm not certain what I could do straight away. So one thing that is available is to leverage my business as an awareness campaign. So I've had a conversation with Christina about this. She suggested a route to put a proposal together for what you've said, Joachim, is to say, well, actually, this is either we don't want this, it's too soon, thank you very much, but no thanks. This is fine. So there's no pressure either way. It's just, here's an offer. So I'll run through the offer as it stands. The website is technology focused, and it's the audience includes obviously job seekers, IT professionals. I won't talk about what the website is. You can look and make up your own judgment on that. But it also has visitors that are students, recruiters, researchers, investment banks. It's quite a wide range of demographic, which to me is aligned to the collective. We don't sell advertising directly. Our main revenue is through job adverts, but we do use Google AdSense network as a fallback for people that want to have display advertising. Hello, Philip. So in this period that is on offer, which is the 3 weeks over Christmas, 21 days, that's a time where it's strange because people actually start to look for jobs during that period, but they also start to become more, they're less focused with their browsing. So it could be something where we take advantage of that to lead them towards the collective. Here's something that, in fact, that's what happened to me. So why shouldn't it happen to somebody else? I wanted to go out of my comfort zone and find what else is happening out there. So why not repeat the process? So there's the schedule. What we would do is unplug AdSense, and we would run banners, which the design, who does the design, the slogan, the message is yet to be determined, but it would be run of site. So that's the option for us. And the reason I'm giving you run of site is that's what will deliver results, we hope. Selectively trying to target is an option. Maybe if that's what the consensus is, we could revisit that. The projections I put at the bottom there are from AdSense. So all I've done is just looked at, so the Christmas period, it's difficult to say because all our traffic is organic. We don't have active advertising campaigns either. And the conversation, I'm confirming there that the CPM is 0. So it's it would be a donation from the business to the collective. If I just, so that's the insertion order. So it's almost as if I'm, as a co-founder of the collective, I've gone to IT Jobs Watch and given them an order, and this is what it looks like. Now, there's an opportunity here to tweak the dials where I've not indicated how many banners you'd like to run. So we could also, because there's no cost to this, we could possibly use it as an experiment as well to see which slogans or messages, and I'm maybe using the completely wrong terms there, but which of them work, which of them convert, maybe not into an action, such as a membership, but which attracts interest. And I've already said that today is I'm not sure. I'm not actually sure what you would use. So I'll wrap up on that and to say there are tweaks we could do. And there's one last thing which I haven't covered here, which is mobile. Mobile is tricky for advertising. Now, there is an option for mobile advertising, but if we get, this is the one that's on offer now, and if mobile needs to be looked at, there is a solution there, but it does require creatives that may be of slightly odd dimensions. So paying a designer to do that may not be a viable option. Although there is a designer here, so it could be that we could be given a template to work from, and we could convert it. And if somebody could, if the group could sign that off, we could trial that as well.
Right.
So if there's any questions, that's it. And there's no pressure. If you were to say no, it wouldn't offend me, and I would totally understand. You know, in fact, what we could do is I couldn't give any future commitment now because it's be unfair to the business. But we could come back to this and say, let's have a look at the period up to Easter, or this time next year. It doesn't. I think maybe rushing into this may be a bad thing. So I'm glad that you've raised the topic that may be a good idea, but not yet.
Now,
Yeah.
this would be instead of AdSense or in addition to AdSense?
It would be a run of site, be a complete. So all the ads would be for the collective for that 3 weeks.
Wow.
It's
Yeah.
I love the idea of using it as a test for the different messaging. I think that's a fabulous idea.
I'm holding
Yeah.
my counsel because I came in halfway through. So I'm just going to listen for the moment.
I agree with Christina. I think A/B testing some different messages could be really good. And since you're saying over Christmas, that's also a reasonable way out. I would have more confidence that we might have improved messaging, because I have concerns that our messaging is currently not good enough. We don't have a clear value proposition by by a week or two before Christmas. I would be hopeful we might have some improved content around the value proposition that we could actually be using and testing out. So yeah, that could be really interesting. Make sure that we've got those channels for the feedback coming back, and that we can say either work with a huge deluge of new people, which I think would be a problem we'd like to have, or figuring out what to do with adjusting messaging in response to the analytics or whatever we could get back.
I'd like to point out the donation by the business to the collective in the non-cost item. is a channel of contribution that we should be very clear is not limited to John's company. For instance, suppose some airline was participating with us and had given us enough credits to get ourselves all to New York. I'm serious. Consider it, please. Let's look at these things.
I'll book my hotel now.
All right.
Could I just have a clarification question? I mean, the part I heard, John, that, to my part, sounds fantastic because we need to get the message out, and people can only consider joining the collective if they know about the collective, right? So in terms of awareness campaign, that sounds awesome. I guess just on the ad tech front of it would obviously be advantageous if we didn't help a centralizing ad tech £80,000 gorilla to continue to build up the profile of people who are interested in us. So would the campaign be run through your own system, or would you just feed it through your AdSense integrations?
Well, as a member of the collective, we wouldn't be using AdSense, no. It would always
just checking.
So yes, that's fair. It's a fair question. This has happened in the past. So what we've done, and it's been a commercial arrangement. So we've done it with training companies. So it's where they want to take ownership of the website and all advertising is theirs. And what we would do is just run it through our redirector. So it's that's where we could do the analytics of tagging the ads to a particular slogan. So I hope that answers it. And if we had more than, just to get slightly technical, say we had 10 ads, it would just be random normal distribution. So over the 3-week period, it should all have the equal page impressions. So there would be no cookies either. So tick all the boxes for, I think that makes sense.
Yeah, how can I make love hearts appear on Zoom? Can I do that, anybody? Oh, there we go. There we go.
So what we do, just unplug AdSense and plug in, do it DIY, run it for 3 weeks and take it from there. Now, as I don't know whether you caught this before, this is the offer today. If it's not the right time, too early, etc., fine, we can come back to it another time. And I can let whoever is the person who would do this, is it Christina, the marketing?
I think it would probably be Joachim doing a lot of the...
just in terms of getting the...
I might help with the words, but not the visuals.
It's when the time's right, then we can maybe come back to this.
But I have to say, I like the idea that as you approach New Year's and therefore New Year's resolutions, that this is just a time to reflect on 2018, given the enormity of 2016 and 2017 in some respects. So
we also
Christmas just sounds lovely for me.
We also had Vanessa DeMoro say that she would do something in December to have some social media content that could go out on Twitter, Facebook type of platforms. So we might look at, like, do we actually, can we get organized enough to really do a kind of a little bit of a push around the New Year? Christmas.
It seems like an opportunity that's too good to pass up. I mean, we can test some messages. Okay, we don't have to have all our ducks in a line in order to take advantage of this opportunity.
Thanks. Yep, that sounds good. I'm willing to try this. Push it further in terms of let's see what the next steps are. Right. So if we go that path, what do we need to do? What the messages are. To Laura's point, is it more of an A/B testing? Do we have a clear value proposition that we can then respond to? And the design stuff, Christina mentioned, I'm involved in that, so I would do that part. So I want to move on with the agenda and talk about the Wardley maps too. But just wanted to hear if there's any block or any one things at this point we should not pursue this. No, okay. So
Awesome.
then let's get things rolling and learn more about it. And again, John, thank you so much for this generous offer. That's pretty incredible.
Oh,
and,
okay. Well, I just hope it converts. That's what matters.
Christina, what were the jazz hands?
I was just seconding the thank you.
I don't know if that was an democracy thing or...
Well, actually it is. And I was just going to say, I should just derail the agenda slightly. One thing we should be building up is some of our signaling as we start to have more folks on these calls and fewer of us can actually speak. But actually, jazz hands or twinkling like this is in a lot of forums is general agreement and assent to what's being said in the group, which is a good way because you don't have to interrupt. You can just twinkle. And that works face to face online. But we should probably start building up some of those practices so that we can have conversations without all of us needing to chip in and actually say something.
It's like charades emojis. I'm all in. I love it.
Great. Okay, so let's move on to the next topic, which is Wardley maps. Let me, what's the best way? I'll share my screen and go to my Wardley map right here. And actually what I wanted to start with, go back in time a bit and show you how that started. How do you build these maps? Simon Wardley's stuff is quite interesting. I wrote a white paper a couple of years back and got to know Simon there, and he helped me to understand some basic concepts of how to improve charting out certain pieces of technology, pieces of initiatives, pieces of things that are happening in an organization. And I think the methodology he developed.
Sorry, am I cool?
Oh, some sound here. All right, good. The methodology he developed is pretty cool because it helps you think through a lot of things. Where you currently in your organization, where do you want to move towards, and what are the barriers and how others respond to that. So a lot of stuff is inside these charts. But let me give you an overview of how these charts are built. What are the fundamental elements of the Wardley maps? So it's basically a two-dimensional thing, right? So on the left side, he has a label called value chain. So that starts from the bottom left is invisible to what's visible. So you can see it kind of as an iceberg thing, the visible portion is on top of the chart. It's on top of the axis here, and it goes down the value chain. And by value chain, we mean there are things that are connected, right? Things that are building on top of each other, right? So the stuff that's visible on top is really connected to stuff that's less visible underneath the surface, right? So it builds on top of each other. So that's an important component of his maps. And the other one is what he calls evolution here. And that's the mind-boggling thing to me. When I put that into my chart, I had the time axis there, right? I said, this to me was time. But he said, no, that's not a good idea, because if you use time, you immediately put things into a sequential order, right? You immediately say, this is happening at this point, and then this is happening next, and you don't get an order into your map. And that's exactly what's possible when you say, okay, this is not time related, but it happens in certain stages. And what Simon brought up is this, he brought it into, he grouped it into 4 stages here. One is genesis. So this is usually when something new arises, right? A new idea comes out, a new way of running, of doing things is developed, and it's in the genesis, in the very early stage of defining, creating that thing, whatever it is. And then it moves on to the what we call the custom build stage. So this is more tangible now, and you can add some more structure around that. Being that in terms of a process, a technology, something that attaches to it. And then from there it goes on to the next stage, which is the product stage, or I think calls it rental options too. So this is when you have something concrete, you put it out there, and people can buy it, can rent it, can take it, and there's a service that you basically offer through multiple channels, right? So that's the product stage. And then the next one and the last one is the commodity stage. So this is kind of looking beyond the product stage. So instead of seeing this as an individual entity, thing that you can buy, thing that you can install somewhere, it's more fluid, it's more like electricity, right? So you just buy a bunch of these items, you just lay some pipes and you get it flown into your organization. Electricity is a common one, but increasingly I see, storage capacity, CPU power are things that are in the commodity segment, and are at the right side of this diagram. So that's the axis. There's also two labels here, which he calls uncharted on the left side and then industrialized on the right side. So the industrialized to me is sort of the known territory. We figured out what this is, and we figured out how to optimize all of these things and serve it up to millions of customers. That's the industrial segment or side of things. So it starts somewhere here in the middle, right, and then it's very strong on the right side of the diagram. And then the uncharted thing is sort of the unknown, right? The unknown territory that you want to explore. There are new things happening. You don't know how it's going to evolve. You don't know what it really is, and you're tapping into sort of an uncharted territory. That's towards the left side of the diagram, and then it moves towards the right. So that's the structure of the overall diagram. Any questions so far about this? No? Okay, so let's fill it in a bit, because then it makes a lot more sense once you see some items appearing inside the Wardley map. Let me see if I click a few more here. How did I start this? Oh, that goes immediately into, I wanted to show you one thing I did early on. Okay, so, right. So I started with two things here. You can see what typically is up here is the customer. So that's kind of the entry point. It's obvious because that's the visible piece. That's what the person who engages with us is the first piece he or she sees. And at the bottom, you see things that are usually needed to run the business, right? So an obvious one is a data center. So somewhere in the back, we have a data center running, right? We tap into this, it's self-hosted, it's in the cloud, whatever it is, but it crunches all the numbers and it runs the services. So that's a good starting point to create these maps, right? To say, so the very top is the customer, and what's the first thing that the customer would see if he or she comes to say dig live, versus at the bottom, see what keeps the things running. What are the things that we don't want to do ourselves, that we want to push out to some service provider, some entity that can do this kind of stuff for us, ideally, as a low-cost item. So that's the starting point of the map, and then you start to fill in sort of the blanks over time, right? So here's one where I started. Okay, obviously, tech we trust is the core proposition, the core idea of why we started this thing. And one branch, then you're starting to branch out of this, right? To say, okay, what do you mean by tech we trust? So we mean there's some kind of a certification that might happen in the future, right? So that's now a lower, see in the value chain, it goes further down. It's not immediately visible, but it is going down the chain to branch out. And then you can even go further down here to say, okay, what do you mean by certification? Right? So I put an evaluation here. So there's a step-by-step process to evaluate certain technologies, certain processes, certain organizations that may be, filling in the need for, or the offering of a certification, right? And then that ripples up towards tech we trust, and this is the thing that the customer sees right now. So this is one example. So let me jump back from here into the full map. because I had added a lot of things and then removed them later on, so I don't want to confuse you with all the details here. But show you the full map. Let me see if I can make this bigger. Okay. All right. Let's start with the top. So again, left side here is the uncharted and unknown stuff. On the right side is the industrial and known territory, right? So what I put here in blue is customer, and that's a generic term. I wanted to put a generic term in there to not get hooked up on this is a client, this is a member, this is an advisor. You know, it could be multiple roles, you know, just in one. So the customer would be seeing you see these 4 lines here. So the obvious one is tech we trust, right? So that's the starting point. And the other obvious one is website, right? So he or she obviously would see a lot of the content, you know, tech we trust, we see that, and we've explained that on our website. And we're building posts, you know, there are tech posts we're gonna write that relate directly to our topical area of overarching umbrella really of technology we trust. So that's the obvious line. Then the 2 other lines are not that obvious. One is the tech we use. That's kind of the thing we are starting to see now, you know, the technology we build in-house, you know, we're starting to use, and we wanted to scale this technology up and see, you know, there's sort of a, you know, big level of confidence in this kind of tech we use, almost a subset, or it is a subset really of tech we trust. We're building that out. So this might be a good anchor for a customer, you know, a person who comes in to say, hey, you guys are using MetaMost, you guys are using some mailing tech, some, you know, some decision-making tools. What are these, you know, what's your experience with that? So that's another good entry point inside this map. And then the website over on the right side. And then is on the left side is this other big piece. I think that's kind of slowly emerging out of all of the stuff we're doing at the Digital Life Collective, which are labeled here as org building or 21C cooperative, right? So this is now in an area that's mostly uncharted and unknown. So why did I put it there? That's because a lot of new thinking is happening in this space. You know, a lot of new thinking in terms of if you go down these lines here, in terms of organizational design, you know, organizational structures like sociocracy, like holarchies, and not holacracy, right? This is talking about holarchies. So that's more the fundamental, the piece behind some of these holonic structures. And things around organizational memory and narratives in organizations, and organizational communications, and what I call here storytelling. How do stories evolve? How are stories shared inside an organization? So these to me are all, you know, very interesting, you know, aspects of bringing people into a collective to understand what does, you know, under this label here, what does a 21st century cooperative look like? And I grouped this, you see this is a dotted line around this. I grouped this here and labeled it experience. So the experience piece is, this is where Sharon's recent piece comes into play here too, right? So experience means people can actually feel, touch, you know, be involved, see it with their own eyes, right? They can come in, they can be in an interim, you know, engagement here for a short period of time, or they come here to learn and, you know, are sort of the student that wants to see how these you know, different technologies and different processes and different decision-making ways are applied in an organization like ours. So it's all about the experience itself, right? So be there, see it, feel it, and talk to people, right? That's an important piece. They come in here and they can reach out to other people and get engaged and do something on their own, right? So have a little side project, sub-project, and they can get started right within the collective, right? So that's this piece over here. And the other piece here that's more familiar to us, obviously, is the tech we trust, where we are looking at things like a certification. You know, I label it seal of trust here, some kind of a way to label certain organizations, tools, technologies, processes as trustworthy. There's the tech posts here, you know, stuff we want to put out on our website. So have topic-specific material, you know, deep thinking pieces, strategic pieces, technology pieces published on our website. And then the dev projects, right? So reaching out to other project development groups in our space and see how we can actually, if we follow the lines further down, go into some evaluation of this technology, right, of these groups, and go into some funding of these groups here at further down the line here, right? So that's kind of the core here with this dotted circle here, the core. It's our starting point, really, how we started and how Philip started to put out the first attractors to get members on board and assemble us here and the 100 people we have right now.
Can I just ask?
Sure. Yeah.
When you say tech posts, are you specifically talking about articles about these things that people are seeing, or what do you mean by posts?
So everything related to, I shouldn't call it tech, maybe tech we trust posts, or something that's related to our overarching topical domain, where we break it down into privacy, into identity, into technology, into decentralization, centralization, anything.
So
communication, yeah, that may be a good label.
Tech we trust communications on all platforms, not just posts on our, not just words. It might be videos, it might be whatever.
Right. So all forms, all media channels and things we put out there around this core topic of technology we trust. Then I wanted to highlight one thing here because Michael had brought this up. That was a good example of understanding the stages here. So custom build, if we put funding into the custom build stage here, what does that mean? That means we kind of create our own sort of funding way of fund these groups or raise funds. If we were to put this thing here, let's say into the next stage, if that would be, let's say, if that would be, where's it here? If that would be, this is the funding thing, right? So if that would be over in the next stage, which is the product stage, right? So then we'd have much more of a, let's say, a Kickstarter type campaign, right? So this is much more productized. We say, okay, here's the thing, here's the object, here's the service that we want to build. Let's put it into some crowdsourcing, crowdfunding environment tool set, and then let's get started on that. Right. So that would be, or even some kind of an ICO, initial community offering. That's much more to the point and more product oriented, service oriented. That would be the difference between putting it here into this segment and putting it back into this segment here, where it's more custom, it's more aligned with what we currently can do and cannot do, right? And we find our own way sort of to develop these funding processes. That's one thing. The other thing, Jim mentioned that you could actually zoom into that circle here, into that node, and then funding breaks down into some other pieces, right? So this chart is meant to be on a higher level. I don't want to break it down into, what's now exactly part of funding, what do we do with this? The only thing in this chart is, you see, again, these two lines going down now, the value chain. One is into the point solution. That's kind of the platform we're building here around certain point technologies we are using for multiple things across the collective, right? So the technology that supports that funding thing needs to be there. And then here's the other big thing, which I call organizational protocols. So these are a set of protocols we develop over time that includes principles, policies, procedures, things, how to, you said it so nicely on your video, Philip, right? We don't want to get mad. We want to get organized, right? What does that mean to get organized, right? So one of the elements, obviously, is to look at what protocols are we going to develop inside a collective like ours, right? So that's this line here, right? So the funding follows now directly some work we need to do on developing these organizational protocols that relate to funding. So one last thing on this axis here, if you go down the organizational protocols, I have highlighted two big ones here that I think are falling under the governance sort of sub-circle here. One is reasoning and sense making for a large group of people, and the other one is collective decision making. These are both areas I think they have incredible potential, and a lot of collectives are looking at ways to figure this out, right? To understand how can we make better collective decisions, and how can we get our members, other collective members, into this sense making space where, instead of arguing, against each other, they align much better. They go into these. So you create a movement within their collective, and see things much clearer. So what kind of protocols can we instill inside our collective that others could benefit from, right? So this is on a lower level and on the value chain, so much further down. And it's, I know, Christina, you had this question that some of the things are still visible, right? If we talk about developer projects, well, we put it somewhere, right, on the website, and you can see them, right? So don't read it as it's all visible stuff above a certain line, right? Read it more as there's a dependency on something deeper, right? That can or cannot be visible, is or is not visible. But there is kind of a dependency we want to explore further if we talk about the stuff in terms of what are the protocols, what is organizational design, what is organizational building, so going further up and up and up, meaning, okay, this is the overarching thing, and the other things are feeding into that concept of the higher, what he calls the value chain, the higher value chain points. And then if we go down, how are we doing on time? Okay, good, 7 more minutes. Let me wrap this up here and then stop for some questions. The infrastructure piece, so that's obviously much further on the right and at the lower end of this, where the point solution is kind of the infrastructure we're currently building with multiple highly targeted solutions towards what's our newsletter campaign environment, what's our web content publishing environment, what's our file serving tool set, what's the technology we use for creating videos, all of these different point solutions that hook into a lot of these nodes up there, which are directly hosted. Some data center has then the data that we control, and obviously sign up for certain plans here to say, okay, we need certain CPU power to run Mattermost. We need certain data storage, to store all of the video files that we create. So this is much more of a commodity here, right? So this is on the very right side of the diagram. And we just want to optimize that piece and make sure this is low cost here. This is good value we get out of this. But not so much thinking about we are hosting it or we having our own boxes, and manage those and administer those. And what's also interesting here, these red arrows here, they mean, I define them as kind of economic forces, trends. So these point solutions, obviously, they move towards the right, towards more and more optimization, right? So they almost become like a commodity. And we can see this in the existing point solutions we already have, like Mattermost, right, or Ghost. They come up with new and new versions. They optimized more and more, and on an increasingly rapid, innovation cycle. It's just mind-boggling to me to follow how fast this stuff develops, right? And what new features and new ways of working together on these platforms come out on an almost daily basis. So that's one thing. The other thing here is the technology we trust piece. I put an arrow into the opposite direction, which I labeled retraction. So kind of the trend towards no, that's not the good thing. Everybody is going towards what Google does, what Facebook does. That's kind of the trend setting, the stake that a lot of people are looking at, not so much in the other direction, which is exactly what we want to go, right? And looking at technology, not retracting, but accelerating and clarifying what's behind this mission. And then similar on the protocols end, if you move to the left here, I would see this as more of the deceleration. So meaning use protocols that are sort of typically instilled in large organizations, right? So HR or organization communications are like the groups to create these kind of protocols that restrict employees, right? That put them into their boxes, that keep them there, make sure they don't break out of this, do something stupid. Versus the protocols we would look at and develop are more on the accelerating side. So this is sort of putting them out of the box, looking at them from what capabilities, what capacities, what talents do you have, and how can you apply that across the collective, right? So we would look at protocols to say, yes, you have good design skills. Yes, you have a few skills in creating learnings sets or some legal skills. Apply them for the collective. Jump into projects that we already have. Jump into circles and you can see what's interesting for you, right? So there's an acceleration that we want to support through some organizational protocols, right?
Can we accelerate towards a closure of this meeting, please?
Yes.
Protocols around that.
Right. Okay. Let me zoom out and stop here. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you, Joachim. That was terrific. That really makes a lot of sense. It's a very rich map space. I like it.
Philip, you're muted.
Hi. Is that the first time we've done a Wardley map, Joachim? And if so, how did it feel? Did it help you, or did you help it?
Great question. No, I mean, as I said earlier, I think you weren't there. I actually had talked to Simon years back. He helped me create my white paper. There's a link in the meeting documents. You can click on that and I'll publish it on our website. You can see it. So there's a similar chart. But at that time I've used not evolution and stages. So my labels are the commodities. So how natural it feels to use these products on the right side, and the ubiquity on the vertical axis.
Gotcha.
So how widespread is it in an organization already, right? So what's holding it back?
May I ask, or it's not to ask a question, it's just to make a point. And the point is for maybe for the benefit for Laura, because I think Laura's slightly questions the technique, which I think is I'm the same actually as well. Now, listening to the presentation, which is given me actually a lot more insight than I've done so far. So I think there's lots of value in maps, although sometimes it can be a hard sell. My takeaway is there are lots of terminology on there. For example, point solutions just doesn't. There's no Google search for it. I worked in IT for 25 years and I've never heard that term before. So I would go away. It's not a glossary. I need to just understand all these terms. Now, the other key point about when you first do a map is to understand the duplication and then on the inertia. And the one that stands out to me is the value proposition of the collective is the retraction that you've got on the tech trust. Mm-hmm. So it's where the public is really pushing away from, they find Facebook and Google, it's all easy and it's free. And so that's where I see, that's my then route is to go back to all the website, the documentation, what's available in Mattermost and start to read about that. So that's my value I've got from this. So I don't know whether you recall, Joachim, where I said in the Mattermost that this could be a way of another introduction to people from a different, for example, somebody like me, trying to understand the business. And I think you said, I'm not too sure, which is probably, to split it into a vote is probably right. But for me, I'm getting a lot of value from it. And the map shouldn't be just for strategy. It just should be understanding the whole organization. Why does it exist? And I think also you've not identified, one last point, you've not identified the difference between users and customers. I think that's quite important to do with Wardley maps. But it's not apparent to me yet. Anyway, I hope that's helpful, Laura.
think we can do breakdowns, of these things that he's generalized here, but it does it does show us really where we are, and it's something that we can, if we're going to act as a unified whole, I think it can help us all be pulling in the same direction if we consent to this map. And, I mean, rather than deceleration and acceleration, we might want to think of that as limiting and empowering or something, to bring it closer to our values and such, as opposed to being a generic mechanism. But I think it's something that we should develop as an organization, and seek consent on, and link it to all these things. I mean, we use point solutions in many of the larger organizations I worked on. It's a fairly common concept, but if someone doesn't know what it is, they should be able to click on it and get information, know what you're talking about, or see, there might be a better term. I don't know. I like point solutions.
It's not a criticism, point solutions. It's just what is it?
Right.
Yeah,
language is so hard.
Yeah, we use general frameworks to solve 90% of the problems, and point solutions for the last 10%, basically, where we would buy an isolated product to meet a requirement rather than integrating it with the rest of the system.
I think the Wardley map, if it helps us really get to the nub of our success factors, if it can help us identify the small, hopefully, number of things that we need to attend to in order to succeed in our mission better than otherwise, then it's a valuable approach. So that's what as you were going through that, Joachim, I was just trying to work out, so what's the 3, 4, 5 top things we really must do to succeed? And I think it's in there. I think it'll help us answer those questions for sure.
Yeah. This is more of a global map, whereas if we look at the customer, okay, that's where we break down the value proposition. So each part of this is its own domain in terms of how we move forward.
Can I suggest the lens between the core and the value proposition, if that intersected with the vertical between custom and product, then there's a lens there which is basically the sweet spot.
So I've got to go in a couple of minutes, but I thought that was really interesting, Joachim. Thanks for presenting it. I guess, I mean, I'm also a little skeptical, like John, that if we have terminology that is quite specialist, it perhaps isn't a tool that introduces new people, but it could still be useful for us, perhaps, who absorb some of the terminology. I guess with Wardley mapping, part of my skepticism is if you need a huge bit of learning to actually be able to create or understand a map, then perhaps the map is not fulfilling its tool of, if we see a map as a way of explaining things to people. So that's kind of one thing. I guess the other thing that I've always wondered about Wardley mapping is if somebody else who wasn't Joachim sat down and took a couple of hours to make a map of the collective, would it look anything like what we've just seen? And
Christina.
I think that's an interesting point, right? Because if it is the case that we would not all create the similar ones, then I would be very nervous about what Jim's proposing is that we adopt it as a tool. Perhaps beforehand would want to do that exercise to find out if we actually have different views of the status quo and then go from there. But that's always something that worries me a little bit, that I do wonder to what extent everybody perceives things in the same way, and that actually having several different maps and different points of view could in fact be even more valuable to us to see the different ways that we think about the stuff. And I'm not going to offer to make one because not until I've had a
I was
chance
going to ask.
to get my head around.
No, you're right. You're right, Laura. This is a collaborative engagement here. I don't want to put this out and say this is the direction. This is not a top-down approach here at all, right? This is just putting my thinking out on a map, and then let's reflect on that. See if certain, circles, lines, nodes make sense or make no sense. It's the global picture, right? It's like the whole, right? And then from there we can dive down into these individual items and see what needs to be on the map, what should be off the map, right? But I do like Wardley's stuff because there's a very strong methodology. If you look at some of his work that he has used in the past on explaining, across industries, across different kinds of organizations, where they are, where they stand, and where they should be. I think it's a very powerful tool to do that internally, right? I'm not talking again. We want to explain that to the world and say this is how we integrate and work.
Yeah, and yes, we should get other opinions on how to make the map, and I don't know. I haven't figured out at this point how I would reorganize it, and maybe I'm led by what Joachim has accomplished. But my feeling is that the map doesn't have to be exactly correct in order for it to be useful, and it's better to have some map that can help enable a collective direction than having no map.
Laura's point about if we all sat in a room and drew a map, they would all be different. I think that's part of Wardley mapping. It's all about life experience or your worldview. What it does do, though, is as a group, it makes you all come to a consensus of where we stand and why we're trying to do it. That's Simon's argument, is if you haven't got a map, then you haven't got a strategy. But the map to understand the strategy, I'm using it as a tool to understand the collective. So,
and the map is never the territory.
I missed that.
The map is not the territory.
Yes.
McLuhan, who said that? Right. So it's a tool. It's one of many tools we have here to explain, visualize, make sense out of things that we all do here. Okay, we're about to wrap up. That was a good session. Thank you, everyone, for joining, for listening, for responding to the stuff. That's great, as always. And this is Joachim Stroh from Brooklyn, New York. And see you next time.
Adieu.
Thanks all.